Hello, folks. I'm Detroit Miracle. Yes, and indeed. Right now, I am here to have more cool comic book slash film slash story discussions. And this such topic of discussions will be about none other than Mrs. Claus. Yes, folks, and we will do power comparisons with Miss Claus as she was characterized in the comic books, various story lore, and even in big screen adaptation form in terms of being a real life person seen as real as anyone else. Okay, let's start with the characterization of Mrs. Claus in the comic books. In the comic books, Mrs. Claus is actually the leader of the Blue Lantern Corps. Yeah, all of you comic book fans out there that follow Green Lantern know about the lantern spectrums of colors. We know that Green Lantern is a will. We know that yellow lanterns are of fear. We know red lanterns are of rage, but blue lanterns are of hope. So, in other words, Mrs. Claus harnessed the powers of hope, and she's able to do anything with the will of hope, in other words, in terms of the complete sum total of collected hope. She's able to shape it into many types of powers, much like Green Lantern does, and the other Lantern Corps as well. So in the comic books, Mrs. Claus is immensely powerful as a superhero, an incredibly powerful superhero by being in control of the emotional spectrum of hope. Yes, so that's going to come to a big shock to many. They're gonna be like, I didn't know that she was a Lantern member. I didn't know she was a Blue Lantern. Yeah, it's true, people. Mrs. Claus is also a Lantern Corps member, but she's the leader of her own spectrum, which is, of course, hope. We know that the Green Lanterns are of will. They tap into will. So whatever you can find use of in regards to the emotional spectrum can be transformed into structuralized weaponry, defenses, and more things. So imagine that. So of course, in the comic books, Mrs. Claus is immensely powerful. Now let's go to live action adaptations of Miss Claus and include all of the lore book stories of her as seen in various types of books, novels, and etc. Okay, Mrs. Claus, of course, is powered by good magic. Outside of the comic book realm, she's powered by good magic, so she can shape that good magic and do many good things. She, of course, has that power. They don't say that she's tapping into hope in the live action in terms of her generating enough sorcery power or good magic. They're not saying what she's tapping into, so we assume it's tied to good magic. But in the comic books, of course, they say it's tied to hope. That's what she's actually tapping into. But on the live action, they never said what type of powers she can manifest, how much of those powers she has, in fact, used before. So, in other words, in the live action adaptation of Mrs. Claus, she's a good doer, a supporter, a helper, a friendly wife of Santa Claus, of course. And she spreads goodwill and joy and bliss, much like her husband does, but that is another story. So, in other words, in lore and in the big screen, Mrs. Claus is characterized as being a pure good spirit, source of inspiration, doer, almost like a saint herself and an angel in combination with the saint. So she has many types of good magics. If you follow the lore in terms of all the sum total of goodness that she does in regards to goodwill, and then combined with her magic, that amplifies the effect. Which Miss Claus do I prefer better? The comic book adaptation of Mrs. Claus or the live action adaptation of Mrs. Claus? I must say that I'm into the Christmas spirit, so I like the big screen or live action characterization of Mrs. Claus. But I'm a comic book reader and I love that stuff. So her character in the comic books is more than intriguing enough for me to read her comic book stories. In other words, overall, I like Mrs. Claus for what she represents and what she stands for. Indeed. Well, thanks for hanging out.